Hi guys, Sugar here with a new video, and this video will be my Arms Warrior PvP guide video for 10.0.5. We are going to discuss about, again, everything that you should know about the new patch, especially since there's a lot of changes in talents. We're going to discuss it on the build section of the video, so you will have three builds from me. One is the competitive meta build, the second one is a fan favorite build, and the third one is my special build that nobody really plays it, but I find it very fun to play in arenas. But it is not very competitive because it does ask you to set it up every time to being able to do that. But anyways, we will talk about stats, the gear that you would like to go for. Then you will have the talent build section with also the PvP talents that I'm going to discuss very briefly because we did already discuss it in multiple videos. But mainly we're going to talk about the combinations that I would go for in arenas and also casual PvP if you really would desire to see. We're going to discuss about the key points that are actually changing on 10.0.5, so the new spells that you got, or also the new talents that you can go for, and we're going to discuss it a bit briefly. We're going to discuss about 2 scums, 3 scums, soul shuffle, your place into the soul shuffle, the clear strength and weakness of Arms Warrior, but also then a bit of the rotation of the Arms Warrior. To be honest, there is nothing really changing on that front, but now with Ignore Pain, spoiler alert, you're going to press it a lot more so you can have tactician procs, but also just in general more defensive for yourself. Anyways, let's start with the video, and we're going to talk again about Arms Warrior. What is a Arms Warrior? Arms Warrior is a melee that is mobile, but not too mobile. It has the weakness of being kited. It can be kited, it can be rooted, it can be everything. And to get out of roots, generally you will have to pop ACD like Avatar or Blazestorm. And you don't want to press trinket, but if you really want to, just press trinket, I guess, if you are really frustrated by roots. But in general, you should have a healer that actually dispels it. But in Soul Shuffle, it isn't always the case. You are a high burst, versatile melee. It can work in multiple comps. We are going to discuss it in trees. Multiple comps, I would say in all comps really. And in general, Arms Warrior is a great addition to a Soul Shuffle match or into a trees comp. In twos, it's a bit different because it is not really a warrior bracket, but you can make it work if you really want to grind twos. In RBGs, your role should be like target calling, so you will have to target call most of the time. If you are not really liking target calling, you should make your own group, try to get a DK or a DH and try to get them to target call. But it's actually very, very important because again, you are in the front line, you know who you can hit, and a warlock or a boomy can target call, but if you cannot reach the target, there is no point. So that's why the warrior or a DK is actually the best target cars in RBGs. In general, you're going to be having a lot of fun if your healers can keep you up. Now let's talk about stats. We are going for mostly crit, then haste, and of course versatilities on every piece. So we're going to of course go first crit and then haste. You want as little mastery as possible. To be honest, I don't have enough conquest to decide to actually change my weapon. I decided to maybe go for crits instead to get like 30%. But right now in PvP, I'm around 26-27% crit with, excuse me, 32% versatility. So it is quite nice. We have also quite a lot of haste in PvP, and we're going to show you whenever I'm actually doing the rotation. I can show you right now, to be honest. So those are my stats in PvP: 26% crit, 32% versatility, 12% haste, and 15% mastery. So I tested a bit of everything, like stats-wise. I would say mastery just doesn't feel good. The problem is it is just a bad stat. It is basically just giving you more damage on your deep wounds effect. So your deep wounds give you increased damage taken by you from you to the enemy player. But the problem is you have to have a ton of mastery to have a good percentage of damage increase, and the problem is you do lose a lot of crit, a lot of haste, and that by itself will make you lose DPS. So basically getting just a flat percentage of more damage is just going to give you maybe the likeliness to do a bigger crit, but you have to crit, and that will be a bit more difficult if your crit is quite low. Crit is just a feel-good stat. You will crit most of your spells. You have also a 2 set, I'm soon to be 4 set, which gives you 10% more crit on Mortal Strike and the damage on Mortal Strike. So basically, it will give you a chance, like a third of a chance to get a crit on Mortal Strike, which is quite nice. And the Foresight just gives you even more damage and even more critical chance whenever you are actually critical striking your Mortal Strikes and executes. So it's always good. I think crit is probably the best stat right now. I already said that in the beginning of the Dragonflight season, and then I tested around with haste, tested around with mastery, and I came to the conclusion again that crit is probably the best stat to go for. We're playing with double like power trinkets, I would say. Like, so we have the alacrity and the ferocity one. We're playing human, so we have will to survive. Again, I think with rogues, it's maybe better to just play with the trinkets. So if you have a chance to have the trinket, I don't know where it is, but it's there. So if you're playing versus a rogue, just play with the trinket, so you can actually just remove CC every 2 minutes. Basically, in solo shuffle, I don't really rely on that because matches are not really long, so it doesn't really matter if I have like a 2 minute or a 3 minute trinket. So that's pretty much the stats. And chance wise, I have awakening stats on my chest. You could go also for the sustained strength if you really so desire. We have haste crits in gems because I do want to have a bit of crit, so I can have actually the like the haste breakpoints. We have primary stat critical strike as the primal chaos gem. We have, of course, first armor kit. The 3-1, it's quite expensive, but I think it's quite nice to have. We have haste and crit enchanted. Again, it's preference. I like to have a bit of haste, but you can also just do full crit if you really want to have 30% crit. I feel like 4% crit or 4% haste is not really a big deal to me, so I have like a bit of variance there. We have a Sophic Devotion and tested multiple enchants. I think the Sophic Devotion now is cheap enough to buy and to be worth it. Whenever it procs and you have like everything, like alacrity and your ferocity one, you're going to do insane more strikes. Of course, it is always nice to crit those, but if you don't crit, at least your base damage of more strike is going to be very high. We're going to play. We're playing actually with leech. It feels good to play with leech. We have 8%. Since we are quite like squishy, everything that can actually help you to get a bit of sustain will help. But I can understand if you really do not want to play without speed. So you could actually just enchant everything with speed. Just in general, those two stats are just nice in PvP. I prefer to go for leech. It did work for me, but if you want to be more mobile, maybe more speed would help you with that. So now let's talk about the 3 builds that we are going to discuss. So we will have the meta build, the bleed build, and we will have the hurricane spiteful serenity build. And I'm going to show you how fun it is. I already made videos about it, but basically it is a very fun build. I'm going to discuss right away with the general build, which is with the Unhinged one. Let's talk about the class changes first. So we have defensive stance now being baseline, so it gives you a extra point to spend somewhere. So now you basically can have intervene, rallying cry, bitter immunity, wrecking throw, everything, to be honest, and you don't need to sacrifice anything. You could actually sacrifice bitter immunity, for example, for concussive blows if you're playing versus casters, like let's say a frost mage or a destruction warlock, where you will have to pummel anyways. Elemental shaman is quite dodgy because they don't really cast, so it feels like my concussive blows doesn't really apply to them. But anyways, you have bitter immunity, which can also help you. You can also go for inspiring presence if you want to. Again, more additional health and more duration. Second wind is quite nice in BGs, so if you want to play in BGs, again, I think second wind is a worthy talent to take instead of bitter immunity. It's a 3-minute CDs. 3-minute CD in BGs or in RBGs. Sometimes you have downtimes, and BGs can be quite long, so you will have more value with that. You can also put 1 point into wild strikes if you really think it's going to help you with the attack speed. Basically, I play this if I'm like in a matchup where I'm not going to get focused. I feel like I have more uptime. If I feel like I'm playing versus a caster and he's going to like slow me and root me, I think it's better to go for pity or immunity or even inspiring presence. So you have, or you can also play with concussive blows. Again, wrecking throw is quite optional. You don't really need to play that if you don't have shields against you. So you can also just remove that and put it there, or go for inspiring presence. So that's mostly what the class trees is all about. We play with Warlord's Torment, but generally with Unhinged you want to play with Blade Master's Torment. So if we give you 2 Unhinged Blade Storms, basically with this patch I feel like it's worth it to go full duration Blade Storms, especially with the amount of CC in the roots and slows that there is in the game. It feels like the more time you spend in your Blade Storm, the safer you are. But again, you can also play a bit more greedy and go for Warlord's Torment, where you're going to do every time a closer smash or avatar and get a lot more crits, and again more likeliness to actually crit your more strikes. Now let's talk about the main tree, so the arms tree, the meta build. This is the meta build. This is the build that you will probably play most of the time if you want to actually climb it. Just like take a build and forget about it. I think this one is the best one you can have. There's a few things that you can change, and it's all preference. But for me, this is the build that I play. So I have Ignore Pain instead of Stormwall. Again, that's a shame that Stormwall is not instead of fueled by violence, so you can actually choose between them. Because versus melees it's quite nice to have, or versus a demonology warlock it's also quite nice to have, because pets can heal you. But Ignore Pain is such a great ability to press just for your tactician procs alone, but also for the total damage prevented. It's about 50k in PvP. But the problem is it is also affected by dampening, so you can go to 30k. But it's still something you can press, and it is a noticeable shield and can help you to actually survive damage. Often than not, you can also just macro it to everything because it is off GCD. But yeah, 40 rage, sometimes you don't want to spend 40 rage whenever you actually want to do a mortal strike. But anyways, that's more or less what's new on the top end. On the mid end of the tree, you have now Strength of Arms, which is one of the best talents that you can actually pick. It gives you your overpower actually 10% increased critical strike chance. You already have a lot of crit, so basically everything you're going to do is going to crit for a lot and do even more damage, because it is even going to increase the 10% critical strike damage from overpower. You also get 8 rage whenever you're doing it on an enemy that is below 35% health, which again can proc your tacticians based on their own spell. So whenever you're doing an overpower below 35% health, like to the enemy, he is going to maybe give you the tactician proc to do another overpower. And again, overpowers, they are your bread and butter on this spec. It is a fun ability to press. It's a builder that actually does a lot of damage, and it just gives you more damage on your spenders, which is basically your more strike, and it is a feel good spell to press. So just press it whenever you can to actually improve your more strike, but also to do more damage to the enemy. Again, Dreadnought with this, it just adds up and you will do insane amount of damage over a whole course of the match. We'll still play with blunt instruments, but there's a world where you play with Warbreaker. Again, if you do a triple spear and you have Warbreaker, it just decimates enemies, because with your Unhinged, you're going to equally demolish people. There is no discrimination on that, so Warbreaker can be fun to play as well. I do also like Spiteful Spirit Serenity. I tried it a bit, and the truth is, yes, if you're playing Unhinged, you want to have more and faster Blaze Storms, but you could play Storms of Destruction, and this will give you like unpeelable avatars in Colossal Smash. They cannot peel you for 20 seconds, right? Avatar will do 40%, like 40 seconds of a 17%, more or less, 14%, I mean, avatar. So basically you will have a lot of increased damage towards the enemy, but also just in general your duration is very high, so you will have a uptime of 50% on your avatar, which is quite big. Just in general, it's a feel good spell, and it is also affected by Blade Master Storm, and so whenever you're doing it, you will have a longer duration on your avatar. You will have 6 seconds, so it's also quite nice to have. But I played that with my third build. In for the kill is always a feel-good spell too. Again, whenever you're doing it on someone that is low, it is pretty much killing time because you will have a lot of haste. It feels a lot better to play with that, and it is also fun to do. We have also rent, but basically because we don't really have a point to spend elsewhere. Skull Splitter is really not great. I don't like to press it, and whenever I do, I feel like disgusted because I have to again have a deep wounds on the enemy, again having a rent on the enemy if I have, like, let's say Tides of Blood, but I really don't like it. So for now I just play with rent and that's it. I see a lot of people actually wanting me to play slam. Problem is I tested it and it does less damage than overpower, so except if they're actually actively balancing slam, for now it is just not worth to press and to actually take any talents towards it. There is also a whirlwind build that you can play. It is fun, but it requires so much setup and it requires so much rage and so much like stars aligning that it is very hard to actually have the perfect whirlwind. Sometimes it just do as much damage as a mortal strike, but you will spend a lot more points towards it, or it will do even a bit more, but again you will have to be lucky with the people actually letting you do your own thing. So that's pretty much my take on whirlwind. You can have it. It's maybe a fourth build that you can play that is very fun, but I would only play it in BGs, to be honest. In arenas I feel like I don't have time to actually build my whirlwind to do insane damage. So anyways, now what's changing on the bottom side? It is pretty much changing everything. Your Valor in Victory is now just only 1 point, although you only have now 1% versatility, so that's a nerf. But with that 1 point, you do get a 30-second cooldown reduction on Die by the Sword. So it's actually a lot of value because you can spend that 1 point elsewhere. We play with, of course, sharpened blades, and we now have the points, especially it's easy to get the executioner's precision, so we do take it, and again it will add up to the damage that you're going to do with your mortal strike. We're playing with Unhinged, so basically we have Unhinged, again doing a lot of damage. It is like safe damage that you're actually doing, so if you have a rogue on you and you're doing a blade storm, it is unpeelable, so they will just get the damage on their face, except if they're actually evasion. If they're pressing evasion because of your Unhinged, then you will have to stop it and you will just spam overpower, try to peel yourself, and then go back in whenever they don't have an evasion up, and that's the time where you can actually kill a rogue pretty easily. We play, of course, with Deft Experience. Again, more chances to proc the Tactician mastery. I wanted to say the talent, and also a bit more mastery percentage, which is always nice to have to do more damage, of course. Battle Lord is again buffed, which is doing like perfect damage for overpower. It is actually insane the amount of damage you can produce with your overpowers. I crit around 60k, between 50k, 60k, and 70k, depending whenever I'm pressing a CD. But it is just going to add up. It is going to do a lot of damage, and it is without counting Dreadnought. So a very good talent to pick. And then we have Fatality, which is a bit odd because it is very hard to actually stack in Soul Shuffle. The games are very spiky, but then you have the odd game where nobody's actually dying, and then you get like a 5 stack on Fatality, and he has 5 stacks, he has to go low just a second, and then you're going to press execute, and more or less they are dead. Of course, it is always going to be hard to actually do damage with it because first and foremost, bobs are going to remove it. All kinds of immunities are actually in removing it, so it's pretty annoying to deal with, I would say. It is also nerfed by 30% in PvP right now, so they buffed it. Like before it was nerfed by 50%, now it's nerfed by 30%, but the problem is it is physical, so it is also affected by armor, affected by a lot of damage reduction abilities, affected by a lot of talents as well. So basically it is not the best talent you can pick, but you have nothing else to pick. We are not playing with Bloodletting because again it is nerfed in PvP, but you can pick it if you really want by just removing a point in critical thinking. I do like critical thinking because again it is increased crit, and just in general it is just a reliable talent to pick. You can also just remove Fatality and go for 2 points into critical thinking, but I do like the value that Fatality can sometimes give. I did win a few games because of fatality, so again, I think it's a good talent point to pick. So this is pretty much the meta build. The PvP talents that I would play with this build is pretty much Sharpened Blade and always Wall Banner. It's way too strong. There is so many CC in the game that really a good Wall Banner at the right time can save you a lot. Basically, the talents that I'm playing with this build is pretty much Storm of Destruction, Warbringer, or Disarm. So those are the three main talents that I'm picking. And then there is also the odd game where there is a lot of AoE. So we do play with dual, so we can actually like focus the AoE a bit less down, so the healer can actually sustain you or your allies. Master and Commander is quite fun in RPGs actually, so I do pick it as well. But I would like pick it over, let's say, Storm of Destruction. You could also play a bit more greedy, but in the sense where you don't have a reduction on healing taken by 50%. So you remove its Sharpened Blade and you play with dual, so you have like the perfect defensive PvP set. That's what's fun about arms. You can always like sacrifice offensive to get defensives, and you can also sacrifice defensives to get some offense. So those are the talents that I'm playing with this build. Now we have also the bleed build, which is without this, how it's called, Skull Splitter, and I play without Unhinged because I feel like I'm using Bladestorm purely defensively. Again, it is pretty much preference. You can also just remove 2 points into critical thinking and you take Unhinged and Fatality, but it is very annoying. Fatality is quite nice, but again, you will have to stack it up. It's not always easy to do. You have not the points to actually spend on executing blows, but you can actually do this, for example, and you can also just spend on critical thinking. So you have a lot of things to actually play around. You also can get fueled by violence by sacrificing a point elsewhere, but I feel like you have to spend a lot of points into the bleeds to actually have a lot of damage. So you have Rend, Bloodborne, Bloodletting, Battlelord, of course, is always very nice, and then you have like some, I would say, talents where you can spend elsewhere. You can also just sacrifice execution's precision and go for the usual stuff. So you can do like, let's say, something like that. You can play like this if you want, but I tested around and this is pretty much the build I like to play around. So we have more strike actually doing a lot of damage, you have bleeds doing maximum damage that you can, and you have also Bladestorm to actually liberate you from CC. Bladestorm will be pretty much your I want to get out of root spell. And then you have on the class tree, we're picking Thunderous Roar. Again, it is now not nerfed in PvP, it's unnerved. You have Thunderous Words, again, improving your bleed damage at all times. And Uproar, which gives you now a 1 minute CD on Thunderous Roar, which is making it a bit better. But I must say, I feel that the Unhinged build, so the first build that I actually showed you guys, that is pretty much the meta build. This is like a fun build that you can play it around, but the meta doesn't want you to dampen the enemy. The meta wants you to actually kill the enemies very fast, and that's the issue. Right now, healers cannot keep up your allies, or they cannot keep up their allies as well, so you want to actually put a lot of pressure at the same time. So if you're playing like a Rend build where you want to dampen the enemy by rending everyone and at one point do a Thunderous Roar where you're going to do a lot of damage, that's fine by me, but the problem is sometimes you just lose a game before you get to that point where the damage is very lethal. So that's why I do not play that too much right now, because I feel the games are very quick in Soul Shuffle. I don't feel like I'm adding too much damage with bleeds, and it is a very risky gameplay because again we're not dampening the enemy team anymore. So once we get a bit more of a dampening feel, I feel like this build would be a bit better, but right now it is something that you're going to play and probably play the other builds more because you feel like you have more kill pressure with the other builds. But overall, you will have a lot of fun with it. Again, Ignore Pain is like a pretty much a pick at all times. You do have a problem with points that you have to spend, because again there's so many talents like Exhilarating Blows. We're not taking it. We're not taking Skull Splitter. We're not taking Fueled by Violence. But if you can spare some points on the south, you can maybe take this if you really want to, or you can just go for exhilarating blows to get more resets on more strike. I feel like since you have played around bleeds, you don't really want to have more strikes at all times, because you're actually applying rends, you're applying your more strike to get your deep wounds, you're trying to actually get thunderous roar out and to do more damage with this. So this is the bleed build. We do play without Storm of Destruction though, because again we're not playing around Blade Storm. It is just pure a anti-root for this build. If you're playing with Unhinged, then of course play just Storm of Destruction. We do play with Warbringer, or we play with Disarm, mostly Disarm because there is a lot of melees, or you can also play Duel again to reduce the actual AoE towards the allies that you have. So it's quite nice. So this is the build that I'm actually playing the least. The build that I'm playing, like the second build that I actually play the most, is the Hurricane Spiteful Serenity build. So basically you have the same build as the Unhinged one on the left. So you will play with Spear of Bastion, and you will have 1 point in wall strikes. Again, it's quite nice to have if you are a aggressive player. If you are a bit less aggressive, you can take just Bitter Immunity or something else. This build is pretty much the Unhinged build, but with Hurricane and Spiteful Serenity. And you do play with Storm of Destruction, even if there is something to disarm. You could just sacrifice Sharpened Blades, to be honest, or you can sacrifice War Banner, but I do prefer to have Storm of Destruction most of the time, because I do not have Anger Management, so I want to have a 1 minute CD go. With Spiteful Serenity, the good thing is whenever you're pressing Avatar, you will have a 40-second avatar, which gives you 12%, excuse me, I said 14%, but it's a 12% damage done increased for 40 seconds. So it will give you like a amount of damage that is not peelable. Of course, it is peelable, but you will have somehow a value on that avatar. And it is better to have some value than, let's say, getting rooted and getting no value on your avatar. All in all, I feel like it's a fun build to play. It is not the most effective one. It is not the most meta one for sure. But having a Colossus Smash for, let's say, 23 seconds for 18% damage increase is quite nice, because it is, again, not peelable. And if you play with Warbreaker, it will be on to end like all the enemies into your Spear of Bastion. So you will have a lot of ways to again do more damage towards everyone, and you will have a lot of fun playing around it. So Blaze Storm with Hurricane is not cancelable, so whenever you're doing a Blaze Storm, you cannot cancel at any time. You cannot even click it out. So basically you will be stuck with your Blaze Storm, but it will give you the possibility to actually be unkiteable again, but also improving your strength to actually get the biggest more strike possible with your warrior. Just in general, it is a very fun build. I tested around also with, again, Shockwave, but it does do no damage. It also DRs everyone on stuns, while it's a 2-second stun, so it's useless to press as well. But in general, I feel like it's a feel-good build. I'm going to link every build in the comments and also in the description, so you can actually play around it. And again, you will have some varied success. Sometimes you will have success with this build, and sometimes you will have success with the Unhinged one. And if there is like some dampening game around, the Bleed build is probably one of the best sustained damage that you can actually play as an arms warrior, because you will get rooted, but the dots are going to roll, and at one point it will not be stoppable for the enemy team. So those are the 3 builds that I'm playing. You can also just play the slam build if you really want to try it out. I tried it out for you guys. It just is not doing enough damage to warrant a slam build. It is doing less damage than an overpower. It is just not worth to press, and in general it is not a feel good spell to press as well. I hope they buff slam towards a point where you could play either slam or overpower build or a more strike build, but right now you don't really have a choice, and it's pretty much a whirlwind build if you're playing slam. So this is my take on it. So now let's talk about the comps in 2s, in 3s, and social, and then we can talk about strength and weaknesses of arms. So 2s, my suggestion would be to play with a healer. It is just the best option you can do as an arms warrior, and I would suggest you find yourself a good resto shaman. I think resto shaman is one of the most aggressive classes that can play with an arms warrior, and you will have some good success. The weaknesses of that build or of that comp is probably playing with versus an assassination rogue and a disc priest. It will make you probably miserable. At least the resto shaman will be miserable because they will get trained down to dirt. But that's the problem with the brackets. You will play versus assassination rogues, which is pretty much the best melee at the moment in Dragonflight, and it will just roll over everyone. Or sometimes you play versus a caster where you will roll over them. So there is like some variance there. So in twos, I would suggest to play with a resto shaman with a preservation evoker. Is also quite nice because then you will just ruin resto druids with the fire breath, actually dispelling the hots. I really like it. You can also play with a mistweaver, which is mostly a fistweaver. That would be actually very fun to play as well. I would suggest to not play with a priest because it is very, very squishy for you to actually make them survive damage. But also in general, they are like aggressive, but also not too aggressive. And whenever they do get too aggressive, you are in a pinch. So I don't know. I feel like it's not really the best combination. Also, UDR with your fear. Feel like you have more value if you have a hex from a resto druid, resto shaman, or a cyclone to just stop like the damage, or for example, a mistweaver that can just do a lick sweep or paralysis or the sleep effect. So, anyways, this is pretty much for twos. You can also play him with hybrids. I would suggest to play with enhanced shaman or with a retribution paladin. But those games are going to be a coin flip, because if you're playing versus a DH Resto Druid, you're not going to win. It doesn't matter how hard you're trying. If they just survive the first go, you're dead. And that's pretty much how it works into, so if you're playing double DPS without a way to actually like go back and sustain yourself, it is going to be always a coin toss depending on the comps that you're going to face. So in threes, the comps that I would suggest to play as an arms warrior is probably with a caster. I feel like the mix of a caster with a melee is probably the best thing you can have as an arms warrior. So I would suggest to play with a shadow priest, with an arcane mage, very strong. By the way, arcane mage warrior is actually very, very bursty. It is not sustainable most of the time. And if you're doing a spear and he's actually doing their burst, you're going to actually do insane amount of damage, and it is not healable for the enemy healer. You can also play arms warrior with a demonology warlock. It is not very fun for the demonology warlock, but you can make it work. And I would also suggest to play with elemental shamans. Those are the comps that I would suggest to play as an arms warrior. If you want to play with a melee and just zug, you can also play with an enhanced shaman, which is basically turbo, or you can play with a retribution paladin. That's very, very bursty, but you are both squishy and you will be both dead versus caustic leaves. And that's why I prefer to play versus with a caster, so I can actually deal with casters because of CC. And if you're playing with an enhanced shaman or a retribution paladin, if you're playing versus a double caster, you're going to have a bad time most of the time. So that's my suggestions. Solo shuffle, I will make a tier list. I'm going to say that right now I did a prediction where I put arms warrior in S tier, but it doesn't feel S tier because there is some clear weaknesses, which is playing versus double casters, playing versus assassination rogues, playing versus the main cast, like the main problems of Soul Shuffle is going to make you feel bad. You have some games where you're playing versus a DK, a Retribution Paladin, and let's say, I don't know, an Handsome Shaman or a Outlaw Rogue or whatever. You're going to have a great time because they are melees. They're going to get destroyed by a Spear of Bastion. Often than not, the Retribution Paladin will have to Divine Shield very quick, and you can actually win those games. But whenever you see one elemental shaman, or whenever you see like a double caster comp, you're going to feel miserable. You will feel like you will have to play like a little, and you know what I mean when I'm saying that. Basically, you're going to try to pillar hump, and that's not going to be great gameplay, but also not great survivability because there is dampening. You don't want to have too long games because then you will just suffer in open play. So that's a problem for you as an arms warrior. So that's the main weakness. And strength-wise, you will have a lot of damage. You have some POs with intervene. You have a lot of CC available to you. War Banner is probably one of the best spells that you can actually press in Soul Shuffle as well. But I just think it is more or less an A tier spec. It's clearly strong. It is a meta spec for a melee, but it has clear weaknesses, and that's why it is shoved down to the A tier, which is not bad to be honest, but I feel like S tier it is really reserved towards the best specs out there, which is for me an assassination rogue, for example. Like if you're kidney shotting every time the healer, at one point the healer will not be able to sustain the DPSs. So that's pretty much your win condition as a assassination rogue, and an arms warrior cannot do that, at least not in a safe way. So let's talk about strength and weaknesses, and then let's talk about the rotation, and then we can just round up the video. So strengths, again, very versatile. You can play mostly with every spec. So in social you can pair up with everyone. That's not a problem. The problem is mostly your weakness. You're actually just paper for casters. You are dead if you're managed to get stunned and you are in open play and they can just free cast. You're pretty much dead. Ignore Pain is not going to save you. It will make you sustain a bit of damage, but if you see 2 or 3 chaos balls running onto you, it is over. You're going to die. You will have to leap out and just play around the pillar, hoping that you're not going to die, and then go back in, and then again be like a bit afraid of actually dying versus 2 casters like aiming at you with their bolts. So that's a big weakness. Strength, again, I think it's one of the best specs to play in general. I think the design is very neat, so you will have a lot of fun to play as well, even whenever you're losing a CR. Again, you will climb as an arms warrior in social. You will just need to realize that some lobbies you will have to play very scared. You don't need to play very aggressive, and sometimes you can win 2 rounds, 3 rounds, 4 rounds. But those games, winning 6 rounds would be a miracle, I would say. So that is pretty much the strength and the weakness about Arms Warrior. I think it is a very mobile spec, but rootable and kiteable. So it's mobile for a few spells and then it dies down a bit. You're very susceptible to slows, very susceptible to roots, very susceptible for stuns. You can die in stuns very quickly. You are squishy, but also not squishy, because Ignore Pain just feels like it's something you're going to press all the time and it will help you, but you can manage to just die. Now, I want to talk really briefly about RBGs because I promised a lot of people that I wanted to talk about RBGs. Target calling will be your role. I'd said that in the beginning of the video, but target calling is what you will be supposed to do if you're playing in a Discord RBG group. If you're not playing in Discord RBG group, whatever, man, you just run up and hopefully they focus the same target as you. But it is very important to actually call the targets that you want to kill. And a warlock or a ranged DPS cannot do that for you because they don't have the idea of can you reach the target or not. While you, if you're actually reaching the healer and you say, let's go healer, let's go mistweaver, for example, then you can reach them and actually blast them. But if you're not doing that, the problem is you're going to play like headless chicken, and at one point you will just die because, again, you're squishy. If you're not willing to target call, which is understandable, you will have to make your own groups because people will just want you to target call. That's your role. That's why you are here as a warrior. But if you don't want to do that, make your own group. Try to find a target caller, which is a DK or DH or another warrior, for example, and you're going to be golden. But you will have to play very conservatively without Discord group, because you can die at any point. You don't have a lot of defensives, especially versus casters, and often not RBGs are going to be won by casters with a big Moomy or a big affliction warlock or a big destruction warlock, for example. You're going to suffer most of the time. So that is pretty much my take on RBGs. Now let's talk about rotation. Really, I want to talk about, again, the rotation for the general build and the bleed build is pretty much the same. I'm going to lower the actual sound because this is actually insane. This is actually insane audio, I think. Yeah. All those starfalls is very annoying. So I'm going to talk first and foremost about the Hurricane Spiteful Serenity build. So if you want to do your one-shots, you want to do overpowers, and then you're going to do a Blade Storm to actually like have your hurricane stacks, which is 15%, and then you're going to do avatar colossus smash, and then you're going to of course do a spear of passion whenever you can, and you're going to just do a lot of damage whenever you can. And just in general, you're going to do unhealable damage if they're not going to stop you. Often and not, what is going to happen is after your Blaze Storm, you're going to eat a stun or fear or a incap or a cyclone or whatever, and that makes the build a bit iffy to play. But whenever they don't stop you, you do insane crits. I've made a video yesterday in the evening about a 170k more strike, which is in arenas going to be very lethal. Like right now, I did a 170k more strike, and it is without Spear of Passion. So you will see that just in general, you will do a lot of damage. And what you want to do is basically do 2 overpowers into a Blaze Storm, into then a Colossus Smash Avatar, into of course Spear of Passion, and then a Mortal Strike. And at that very point, you're going to destroy someone. And if you're lucky and you have, let's say, a few executes on the enemy, so you have execute, and then you're going to do a Blaze Storm, and now we don't have Avatar and we don't have Spear of Bastion, you will see that damage is quite nice. So you see 86k without a crit, so if it critted, it would be like around 170k, something like that. The damage is really nice, but you will have to play around that. So that's the most difficult part about this build. Now, about the bleed build, it bugged a bit. So about the bleed build, pretty much the difficulty in this build is that it is a dampening build. But if you want to play the bleed build, basically you want to have the bleeds at all times. So you gotta bleed, you'll have the bleeds up. Both bleeds are up right now. And then if you want to burst, you're going to do a Blaze Storm to get you the roots out, and then you're going to stop it. Avatar Colossus Smash into, of course, the Thunderous Roar, into again refreshing the rend, and you're going to do insane damage at that very point. And it is not healable. If they're staying near you, you're going to do a lot of damage. Of course, don't forget to press Ignore Pain whenever you can, and you're going to do a lot of damage. The problem is, it is a dampening spec. You're going to have to count on the enemy to be or the dampening to do his job to actually make you kill targets. You're not going to kill, like, let's say, a Spear of Bastion at the start of the round. That's not going to happen because people can just react on it. And it's also a bleed, so it can also get removed by Dark Iron Dwarves, for example. Or if it's a Evoker, he can just cauterize it. So it's very annoying to deal with that. But whenever you can actually, like, burst, it is going to be insane. The damage is actually very noticeable. It is also a very fun build to play, and you can play that. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that the Unhinged build is probably the most safe build that you can play right now as an arms warrior. So I'm lagging every time I'm pressing talents for some reason, but whatever. So we have the general build. Again, I'm going to discuss it, and then we are going to stop the video. So we have the Unhinged build. Basically, what you want to do is, I'm going to try to get the Blaze Storm as fast as I can. So you're going to try to make pressure, and whenever you can have pressure, you're going to do a lot of damage. So I'm going to try to get my Blaze Storm as fast as I can because of anger management real quick. So let's say you are in an execute phase, so you have like 2 executions precision charges, and you're going to try to burst the enemy team. So what you want to do is basically do a Colossus Smash into a Spear of Bastion into a Avatar Blaze Storm, so it doesn't have a GCD, and then you can just continue the onslaught with, of course, executes, overpower again, and then a more strike into a Blaze Storm again with Avatar, and you're going to do insane amount of damage. And the thing that warriors are doing that can one-shot people is pretty much do a Spear of Bastion into a Avatar with the Blade Master's Torment, which gives you a Blaze Storm whenever you're pressing Avatar. And Avatar is a off GCD spell, so it means that you can do Spear of Bastion into a Avatar, and the same global you will do the Unhinged Blade Storm damage, and it's actually a lot of damage. I'm going to show you another time, so you can actually understand what I'm meaning. So I'm going to try to farm the Avatar real quick. I'm going to discuss, like, really quickly something as well. So basically, I play with Stone of Destruction most of the time because I do like to have Unhinged as much as possible, because it is a talent that you're picking, so you want to have full value with it. And I just think it's a very fun build to play as well. So all those 3 builds that I showed you are very fun builds to play. Now, it is preference which build you want to play. What I would suggest, if you want to gain as much rating as you want, it is the Unhinged builds that is going to give you the most rating possible, because it is damage that is not kiteable, it is like not rootable, it is actually very hard to deal with as a enemy player. While, for example, Hurricane, Spiteful Serenity, for example, or Bleed build is actually kiteable, rootable, stoppable, and most of the time you're actually a gimmick. While, for example, the Unhinged one, this build is going to be feeling good at any time. So this is pretty much the build I'm suggesting. I'm going to show you one more time. So basically, I'm going to charge. I'm going to avatar again. We have sharpened blade. What I want to do is a colossus smash into a spear of bastion with my avatar, and look at this, the same global. I have blade storm plus spear of bastion, and this is just not sustainable. People are just dying with it. And if it's a healer and he doesn't have pain suppression, for example, that healer is going to die. It doesn't matter how he plays or what, you're going to have a great time. And also, I would suggest, if you're spearing 2 people, do not hesitate to press sweeping strikes first and then do a blaze storm, because then you will have an unhinged more strike on both of them, and that's going to give you more damage. So I would suggest you do that to have maximum damage on both targets, and also to not have the likeliness to actually have the more strike on the wrong target. So this is pretty much my guide. Hopefully you learned something from that guide. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and hopefully you do play the builds that I suggested. Of course, everything is in your hands. If you want to change something from that build, you can do that as well. If you think I'm not right about a certain thing, again, please correct me in the comment section below. I think with the amount of games I've played as an arms warrior in Soul Shuffle, I think I got as much information that I wanted to actually give you guys. I think macros wise, again, there's a few things that you can do, but I don't really like to talk about macros because it is actually very easy to search. But basically, you have avatar. You can make avatar with Colossus Smash together if you're playing with Darkblade, Mars's Torment, or with Thunderous Roar. So you can basically do avatar Thunderous Roar together. You have, of course, target party 1, target party 2, intervene. You can also just hover towards the ally and then press intervene. It is the same. Rallying cry, bitter immunity, last stand, also a very good macro. You have execute, cancel auras, blade storm. So whatever you're doing unhinged and you have to execute the enemy, or you want to pummel, the same with pummel. You can just cancel the blade storm. Again, big disclaimer, if you're playing the Hurricane build, you cannot cancel Blaze Storm, so you need to play accordingly. Again, Intimidating Shout, cancel aura, Blaze Storm. You can actually do everything around to cancel auras. You can also do Die by the Sword with Sinful Gladiator's Emblem if you play with that. I don't play with Sinful, by the way, that's from Shadowlands, but you can just put the emblem into the Die by the Sword macro, and you will have both at the same time. You can also do that the same for the Rallying Cry one. So that is pretty much the guide I wanted to discuss with you guys. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully you enjoyed the guide. Hopefully, again, we have a discussion in the comment section below, and you will play a lot of Arms Warrior and get a lot of rating. That's what I would give you guys as a wish towards you. So thank you for watching this video. Really appreciate you. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that yet. We do PvP content, PvP guides, PvP soul shuffles, PvP RBGs someday if I'm actually playing a lot more RBGs, 2s, 3s, again, tips and tricks, discussion videos, tier lists. Again, subscribe to the channel if you want all those kinds of content, and we will catch each other very soon in the next video. Have a great day. Bye.